Today we're talking about blueberries, something really good. They're going all through the food system. You find them everywhere in breakfast cereals and muffins these days and other baked goods. You can incorporate them in salads and in other parts of the meal in tart sauces, so that's maybe something you want to try. But today here in the kitchen, I thought we would go back to some of the basics and look what happens in blueberry muffins. So we're going to start with a basic recipe, and you can use any recipe that you are familiar with. The points I'm going to bring up are not specific to the recipe that I'm working with, but we'll work with any recipe for blueberry muffins that you've got. We're going to start today with one large egg, and I'm going to whisk that up a little bit to beat it together just a tad, and then I'm going to add that to half a cup of milk and stir that together a little bit, and to that we've got 1/4 cup of vegetable oil, and then we'll set those aside and we'll take a break from this and go over and look and see some of the things that I wanted to mention about blueberry muffins. First, you see here one that's made commercially, and then one that I made using a standard muffin recipe, the one that I'm using today. Now this is the kind of muffin and the size of muffin that you get if you use muffin tins. Are about 2 1/4, 2 1/2 inches in diameter. That's all the bigger it needs to be. That's a serving. When you look at comparing these two, you notice size of all of this, of course, is the first thing you're going to notice. This one is probably about twice the size when you look at volume, which means it's also going to be about twice the number of calories. And the commercial ones also tend to be a more cake-like mixture, and so they often are higher in fat than the standard ones you make at home. Now, as you're eating blueberries, it starts as a very healthy food, but like any other food, when you increase the amount that you're eating or you increase the amount of fat in your diet, you can offset some of the health benefits that you get from the blueberry itself. All right, let's look a little bit more about what we need to do with the muffins. I have 1 1/2 cups of flour that I've spooned into a measuring cup, 1/2 cup of sugar, 2 teaspoons of baking powder, and 1/2 teaspoon of salt. And that you could cut down a bit. That's not a lot of salt when you consider it's going to make 12 muffins. It doesn't increase the sodium content dramatically. Now, one of the important things to remember about muffins when you're making them is that you don't want to overmix. There's not a high fat content here. I'm using a recipe that's got a little bit higher sugar content, so it protects me against overmixing a bit. The problem with overmixing is that you develop too much gluten, and I've almost messed up here. What I want to do next is whisk these together to get the ingredients well blended. Now, you have the option of going through here with a sifter and sifting them together, and that will probably give you the best results. Pre-sifting the flour, sifting the ingredients together again. But this gives, for most cases, adequate results for family use, which is what we're going for. Now, once we have those well blended, we'll add the liquid ingredients to this, and being very careful just to mix it only until they're moistened, because we don't want to develop a lot of gluten, which is the elastic power within the flour. If you do that, then you end up with tougher muffins. So just until everything is pretty well moistened, and I'm not even going to go all the way to make sure everything is completely moistened at this point, because we want to add the blueberries to this too. Now, another thing that I wanted to bring to your attention about blueberry muffins is that they have obviously blueberries in them. Now, the pigment in blueberries is a reddish pigment. It can be red to blue, and it's called anthocyanin. This has definite health benefits from an antioxidant standpoint, and in fact brings blueberries almost to a nutraceutical stage, and that we're seeing some research coming out now that blueberries themselves may help reverse some of the memory loss. We found studies where it reverses memory loss in octogenarian rats, and it also can reverse some of the balance problems or the motor skills that we lose during aging. Rats that could only stay on a pole for 5 seconds after consuming large amounts of blueberry extract were able to stay on the same tightrope pole for 11 seconds, so that there's some reverse in that. But the pigment is pH sensitive, and that throws us for some problems when you're looking at cooking. And I've got an example here of a couple of muffins where this will show up. This is one using the standard recipe that I'm working on today, and you can see that the blueberries in there are purplish to red, and the flour is creamy colored to white, and this is what you're going for. If the pigment becomes less acid or more basic, then you end up with something that looks like this one over here. You notice that one of the dramatic changes is that instead of being reddish and purple, the blueberries are very deep purple, almost black, and the flower has turned from that creamy white to yellow. And this is the effect of adding some baking soda to this. Now, some home recipes for blueberry muffins are not well formulated. They'll have too much soda. They may start with soda and buttermilk as a combination, and if the soda content is too high, then you end up with the dark purple to black and the yellow color. And the worst thing is they don't taste very good anymore. You get a washing soda flavor. So if you've got a recipe that's not well formulated, what you can do is add a little bit of an acid ingredient, either increase the buttermilk content or substitute buttermilk for regular milk, or you may want to add a little bit of sour cream to your recipe, but something that adds a little bit of acid so you can get rid of that washing soda flavor and get the chemical balance back in place in your recipe. Now, blueberries themselves are the last ingredient that you want to add, whether you add them frozen or whether you add them fresh. If you're starting with frozen, it's a good idea to leave them frozen because there's going to be the least amount of damage. If they're fresh, you want to add them and fold them in rather than stir them in, and do as little mixing with them as you can. This is going to also mix in the last of that flour there, but you want to try not to pierce the berries any more than necessary. Otherwise, you're going to get a lot of bleeding in the berry itself, and the batter itself, instead of having white batter, you'll end up with purple batter. These are then going to be put into muffin tins, no more than 2/3 full, and you'll bake them at 400 degrees for, in this recipe, 20 to 25 minutes until they're golden brown, and you can even do a toothpick test on them to make sure that they're done. You don't need to use muffin liners if you choose not to. I have pretty much come to the conclusion that that's however your family has always done it. But if you don't use the muffin liners, then you do need to grease the muffin pans. Blueberry muffins are a wonderful choice. They are a healthful food. And we are seeing some other special things besides just the high fiber, the vitamin C, and the good source of potassium that we always knew blueberries had. We're seeing some extra benefits from them as well. Keep fruits in mind when you choose your produce for the day. Remember, 5 a day, every day, and blueberries fit in there very, very well. For Oklahoma Gardening, this is Barbara Brown.
We hope you've enjoyed this classic from the Oklahoma Gardening Vault. Remember, even though these tips and techniques are timeless, there's always something new to learn in the world of gardening. By subscribing to both Oklahoma Gardening and OK Gardening Classics, you'll have access to a wealth of gardening knowledge, both classic and contemporary.